Welcome to the Uncut Podcast. I'm Pastor Luke.
I'm Pastor Cameron.
And this is the Uncut Podcast, where we have uncut and honest conversations about faith, life, and ministry. This week, we are going to pick up, I guess, kind of where we left off.
A little bit.
Which it was last week. If you tuned into last week's episode, was all about politics, kind of politics broadly. And yeah, we just kind of think that there's a lot to talk about there because it seems like over the last, I don't know, decade or more, or the last several election cycles, that religion, or particularly like conservative evangelicals, have continued to play a significant political / demographic role in politics. And that's its own, considering evangelicals as a demographic rather than a theological distinction is its own thing that is kind of complicated and icky.
It's kind of weird. I think that YouTube is nerfing our podcast on this episode.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think the algorithm is hiding it because it only has 29 views.
Right, which is very low for us.
Very low.
Right. Normally,
especially with an episode that I think was full of a lot of good content.
Yes. Well, and it's also something that like a lot of people love to talk about.
Right. Yeah.
So,
although our subscribers are up.
Our subscribers are up. So
we have 50 subscribers now.
Wow. Thank you very much, everybody who is subscribing on YouTube.
On YouTube, yeah. So. Huge. But yeah, only 29 views for our last YouTube version.
And like 2 or 3 of those are us. So
right. Just as a comparison, the one right before that was 156 views, which was a little bit higher than
which was
normal.
like a high standout for us. I think kind of average for us is somewhere in the 40s, like the 30s to 40 range.
Looks like a couple in the 90s and 70s and stuff like that. But I'm guessing that we get more listens on like Apple and Spotify than we do on YouTube.
Yeah.
Which I kind of prefer this model.
Do you?
Yeah. So like in the morning, if I'm running on the treadmill or something like that, I'll even stick a YouTube video up. And if there's a YouTube version of the podcast that I'm listening to, I'd rather watch / listen than just listen. So
I think I generally prefer to listen.
Yeah.
But that's also how I like to consume my podcasts. Like a really chill evening for Luke, like super, super chill, is like a podcast and like a video game that doesn't take any brain power. Like, like Mario or something with no dialogue, run from point A to point B, like jump on the mushroom and just listen
get big.
Yeah, and get big. Some Alice in Wonderland stuff there. And then listen to a podcast,
Yeah. I got a text this morning from a friend who said that they listened to it yesterday.
Yeah.
And loved it. Thought it was a really good episode. So, and of course we shared it all over our socials.
Yep.
But I don't know. There's no rhyme or reason.
No, there's, everybody kind of bemoans the algorithm gods. And it's because, I think you said the other day, I don't think the algorithms want to be understood.
No.
So they're a mystery. We just keep trying to do our best and put out good content and see where it goes.
Right.
So,
where, as you're kind of reflecting on what we talked about last week, what do you feel like is the natural next step of the conversation, or maybe like anything that we need to circle back to talk about more?
I feel like maybe, to me in my head, some of the like biggest topics that we didn't quite we approached, but we didn't quite address is the it's like the current expression of Christian nationalism. And then honestly, like I kind of want to talk about Christians' relationship with Trump. Like we kind of kept it kind of vague last week. I do want to say something specifically about people's relationship with him in particular, because I think it highlights something. So,
Yeah.
those are kind of I guess that's kind of the vein I'm kind of like feeling. Was there anything that you felt like we needed to circle back to?
I don't know that there's anything we need to circle back to per se. But I would say the general direction of Christian nationalism, at least in the way that it's being expressed now, I think that there may be a danger of misunderstanding, and I won't speak for you, but
Sure.
of misunderstanding the what I think of our country when it comes to talking about politics or faith.
Right.
Really, like, I think there is kind of a phenomena where, like, if you speak, I wouldn't say negatively, but if you speak as a contrarian to a particular well-held position,
You must be the complete polar opposite
Right.
and against. There's
Like-
no gray.
right. So if you hear us talking critically about the way in which a large, not the totality of, a large swath of those identifying as evangelical Christians have, aligned themselves with Trumpian politics. And if you don't align with that, then you hate America. You are an ultra liberal, and you love Joe Biden. There's just no room. Well, I think probably in the political discourse, one of the things that frustrates me the most is that there's just zero room for people leave zero room for gray or
Yes.
nuance anymore.
Well, everything's become either or. Either you are for us or you are against us. Either you support me 110% or you are 110% against me.
Yeah. I think part of the point that I was trying to make last week was that I don't think Jesus is particularly interested in supporting any candidate or either candidate,
Right.
no matter who it is. That's the point I was trying to make, is that, like, are there social issues or even economic issues that Christians can vote intelligently and informed upon that one candidate supports more than another? Yeah, I think so. But I think to make the blanket statement that, like, if you're a Christian, you must vote for Trump. If you're a Christian, you must vote for Joe Biden.
Right.
If you're a Christian, you must vote for X because that's what Christians do.
Or hold this political view.
Right.
Right.
And although I do think that, like, the particular strain of Christian nationalism that we experience now in those who are, like, really, really, really super supportive of former President Trump's candidacy and his presidency when he was the president, I don't like. I think I began to notice veins of that even back into George W. Like, he was the Christian candidate on the ballot.
Yeah. Yep. Which in his theology and it's
Right.
and arguably its impact on his policy decisions
Right.
were and still are very, very controversial.
Sure. And so I remember some of it then. Then I also remember some of it with President Obama.
Yes.
And
particularly early on in his first presidency.
Right. And around the issues of healthcare. Like healthcare is a basic human basic human right. Christians should be advocating for healthcare for everyone and da 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 da. You know, and so it became like you must vote in this particular way or with this particular candidate in order to be considered Christian.
Yeah.
So I don't, although I think it's kind of found its apex in President Trump, former President Trump. I don't think that it's the first time that we've seen it.
Right. No, it's not. Maybe it's just the certain confluence that is bringing out the particular problems as it kind of were. I guess it's hard to kind of say because our theology ought to inform our politics, but our theology is not our politics. Or some version of that line. Because it, I was thinking about this earlier, there has to be room in your theology and your worldview for there to be Christians of other nationalities. And for America to not necessarily be I am not of the persuasion that America is necessarily, it might be, I don't know, all that speculation about America being one of the important nations in the end of the world, the Revelation, all that stuff we kind of talked about a couple weeks ago. I'm I don't know, don't know when the hour is coming, don't know that the United States will be here forever. I like the United States, would love it to continue to stick around. But I guess I just if you zoom out your perspective to a more global perspective of believers everywhere, and you let go of the assumption that that America is God's favorite country and that God's American, Jesus is American, right? He roots for my hometown football team. If we kind of let go of some of that assumptions that we like to tick, how does that impact the way that we view our integration or theological integration into politics?
Yeah, there's lots of different directions that we could go. I think that one of the things that I have recognized over the last few years, especially, is a confusion on how a person primarily identifies themselves. Or maybe better said, what is the central feature of their identity?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of belief around the idea that I am an American, and I am a Republican, I am a Democrat, I am a Libertarian, I am a X, Y, or Z,
right?
Whatever party I affiliate with.
Yeah.
I am an American. I am this party. I am conservative in my social policies, and I am a Christian. And the way in which we approach the world and the way in which we approach issues then is defined by which one of those identities is primary.
Yeah.
And for many, I think that the primary identity of those professing faith in Jesus Christ has not always been as a daughter or son of God, as a citizen of a different kingdom, a kingdom that Jesus says is not of this world. Right? We are not primarily Americans. We are primarily citizens of heaven and children of God. And so if that is our primary identity, how does that change the way that we interact with or that we think through our relationship with any political candidate or any political system or any political belief or position, you know? Because we don't take any of it as just hook, line, and sinker. Because that's not who we are. I am not primarily an American.
Right.
You know, similar to the way, maybe this is a poor analogy. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if it works.
Okay.
Similar to the way that, like, you got married almost a year ago now.
Yeah.
I got married almost 20 years ago now. And 19 and a half years ago, Sherry's identity is no longer like as one of her family of origin, her maiden name. And we make that distinction in our wedding vows, right? A wife will leave their family and become united to her husband. A husband will leave his family and become united to his wife, right? Like, your parents didn't gain a daughter.
Right.
And Oksana's parents didn't gain a son. They both lost a daughter and lost a son. Right. You created your own family, right? And it's the same, I think, with it's the same with our faith in Jesus, is that, like, via my faith in Jesus, I am no longer identified by the marks of the old world that I was a part of, or the old kingdom that I served. I no longer am a slave to that kingdom. I am now a slave to righteousness, as Paul says in Romans chapter 6 and 8. And I am a citizen of heaven. I'm no longer a citizen of this world. But we don't think like that.
Right. Yeah.
Our relationship with Jesus is something that informs our other identities. It is the seasoning that we sprinkle upon the other more real, important things, rather than being the basis through which and by which we make every other decision in our life.
Yeah. I like to put like a practical example on this. Like, when I think about this, I think of, there's some signs that I have seen, but I think of one in particular. It was a big barn. Side of the barn was painted with the American flag. And on top of that flag, it was written, it says, "America needs Trump and Jesus." And, you know, I don't know the intention or, like, you know, what that person's, you know, internal philosophy or theology or even their intention behind that. But when I saw that, I was just like, I don't think they're not the same person.
No.
I feel very, or like another version of that sign that I've seen is like signs that say, like, you know, God, guns, and Trump or something like that. And I was like, I don't feel comfortable having that be I feel like it is not okay for Jesus or God to be sharing the platform with a political candidate. And it bugs me. And you know, maybe, you know, that's not what's being intended to be communicated, but like when they're communicated side by side like that, where we're synonymizing like a political candidate or a political agenda with God or with Jesus, I think we're doing something very dangerous, in my opinion.
What do you think it is about, and I really don't intend to make this all about Trump, because I think the issue is not actually Donald Trump.
No. Well,
At all.
yeah. Well, before we go any farther, like, I'm not saying you can't like Donald Trump.
Right.
I'm not saying that.
No.
Like, if like, I'm just saying that, like, and I think maybe the narrative has shifted since the longer he's been in the limelight. But I remember very early on in his election, in the first election, the amount of evangelical pastors who just swarmed to that campaign and to him as a candidate and were publicly endorsing him in every single platform that they could. I think that has lessened. I don't think it's disappeared, but it has lessened the longer he's stayed in the limelight, because I think some of his character flaws have become more and more harder to defend. If you think he's like the best candidate, if you really agree and like his policies, like, or you just think he's, the best candidate out of bad choices, like, whatever, if you like him, that's fine. I'm simply just saying, I think I'm trying to kind of be a corrective to the place where Trump is kind of sitting, he's sharing the stage with Jesus a little bit.
Yeah.
Or it's becoming, well, if you follow Jesus, then the only de facto conclusion is that Trump or conservative, or however you want to frame it.
What do you think it is about, and I wanted to ask the question, but I wanted to qualify it with, it's not even really about Trump. At least it's not for me. I think it's about the way in which Christians process their identity in a political world.
Yes.
But what is it that you think about a candidate like Trump that was so magnetic for the Christian population?
Oh, man, I think we want heaven on earth on our terms. Like, I think we've begun to confuse, like, I don't know. I guess, like, part of me thinks that we've begun to confuse political activism, or, like, I think the line between religion and politics has become so blurry, or the concept of, God's kingdom not necessarily meaning America has become so blurry that we think, like, the end is coming. Like, because I don't remember when this happened, but there was at some point where, like, maybe it was when Trump won the re-election race, and the amount of people who were they were catastrophizing it. It was like, this is the worst possible thing to have ever happened. It's the end of all things. It's, like, awful, right? And I'm just like, is it? Like, is this the worst thing that could potentially happen? Isn't God still in control at the end of the day? Doesn't God still, like, the Bible says over and over that God plays a hand in the rising and falling of kings and kingdoms. Like, at the end of the day, can't I go home and rest that God's got it? And that whether things are going the way I think they should or not, like, aren't we going to be okay? I don't know if that really answers the question, because I don't really know exactly. Maybe I don't have a big enough perspective to see what has happened in the hearts and minds that we've so quickly gotten kind of sidetracked by politics.
Yeah, I guess my question was really more about, like, what exactly was it about his messaging, about his policies, about his, like, that he quickly became the only viable candidate for Christians to vote for.
I think it was like Trump didn't try, like a lot of politicians will try and kind of be friendly enough that the like less hardcore conservatives could say, oh, well, I kind of like the people who are kind of independent, right? The people who kind of swing, right? And then you try and be kind of moderate. And by being that, you hopefully kind of capture enough people from both sides. You even maybe pull a couple Republicans who are maybe not happy with any of their candidates or something like that. But Trump just went straight towards being like very clearly divisive or very partisan, I should say. Like, he's not a guy who's reaching across the aisle necessarily.
Yeah, no, I think maybe to say it another way, he was very clear about what he believed and what he thought.
Yes.
He did not give the political pat answer that tried to pander to segments of both sides.
Yes.
He just was, like, in a lot of cases, harshly saying what he thought, what he felt, whatever came to his mind came out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
There's, and I think some of the kind of the rawness of his energy and like the uncut kind of like he just says what he thinks kind of mentality, and some of that what he's saying being somewhat angry and being insensitive and politically incorrect really spoke to a large segment of America that I think feels like their voice isn't heard.
Yep.
I don't know if you've been paying attention. It's not like I listen to a ton of country music, but if you in the last month or so, there's been a lot of country songs hitting the top of the charts and staying there, and they are particularly angry, and they have a lot of like there was a internet YouTube viral one that went up. I think it was called
Richmond, north of Richmond.
Richmond, north of Richmond. There was another one that I don't remember because I don't listen to country music. There was another one that I listened to the lyrics and watched the music video, and it's very violent and it's a very threatening and angry song at the end of the day. And I'm like, that is the demographic of America that is angry. That feels like, because of urbanization, more population lives in the largest cities of America than live in the country. But there's more like that disparaging meant of like, there's people out in the country and then there's people in the city. The city tends to be liberal, country tends to be conservative. Like, excellent example is our state, New York. New York, liberal, right? No, I mean, New York City, I should say. New York City, liberal. And then you look at the rest of New York, which is a massive state, by the way. It's almost entirely conservative, very much so. And then, but then where does our state legislature and our voting go during election season?
It all goes liberal.
All goes liberal. But you have this massive swath of people who we're like, we live in this state. We feel like we may take up this massive land portion. And because there is a city, like if New York City was not in our state, our politics, our policies, the way the amount of red tape and infrastructure and the way the government's run in the state will look very different if you just annexed New York City out of our state and let the rest of New York State do what it wants to do and let New York City do what it wants to do. That city's kind of like driving. And that's a really disempowering and frustrating experience for everybody in the rest of the state who doesn't agree with the way that the city's pushing and pulling things. And that's the way the rest of the country feels too, like this frustration. And so, and then also there is just that, like, you know, you go rural and you're going to encounter people who are more culturally Christian.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of truth to that. I think that there is a fairly silent but growingly verbose majority of people who feel forgotten and unrepresented, feel like they have no voice, and feel like in some ways that Trump is the anti-establishment type of candidate, and that he represents kind of like the anti-Washington
drain the swamp.
Yeah, type of mentality.
Right.
Yeah, like make America's not great anymore. It's because of politicians. Let's drain the swamp and make America great again.
Yep.
And so there's been this growing sense of like disfavor and disgruntledness in that demographic, and I think what those who really support Trump express is that this is a candidate that sticks up for real Americans, you know, and I you know, like, taking all of that at a very surface level, I would really personally probably agree. You know, that like, all of those things are probably pretty true. The question then for me comes back to a little bit of what we talked about last week is, all right, is or should be the primary voice, motivation, speech of Christians, is that where we should be expending our energy? Like, is our energy best spent in joining a chorus of disgruntled people to call for the heads of those who have subjected the country and align ourselves with a candidate that just shares that common like voice or theme,
perspective,
thread or perspective? Yeah. Right. I think in some ways we unwittingly put ourselves in a enslaved position to a system of the world that we're not really meant to engage in that way.
Right.
You know, like, well, Trump stands up for religious freedom. Okay. Do I appreciate religious freedom? Of course I appreciate religious freedom. You know, do I believe that it is the government that allows me to worship God? No.
Right.
Right? No. And so do I need a political candidate to protect my religious freedom so that I can continue to be a Christian? No. Right. Not at all. You know, I will be a Christian because a Christian is just not something that I do because I'm American,
right?
And because I can, you know. So I feel like for me, it's a little bit like, okay, yeah, we Christians, we love Trump because he tells it how it is. Like, is that a Christian value? Is that a biblical, like, Christ-centered value that we want to, that's our reason? That's the reason? Is that, you know, like, we're going to follow Trump because America was founded on God. I don't know how many times I hear people say that. I'm like,
oh, yeah.
America was founded on God, and Trump tells it how it is, and he's trying to get us back to God. And I'm just like, No, you need the Holy Spirit to get you back to God. Like you.
Right.
If you're waiting for someone else, Trump, Obama, George Bush, Joe Biden, whomever, right? If you're waiting for someone else to
enact the correct policies that you think will make this a more God-blessed, honored nation.
Right? You are avoiding the work of personal holiness. You're avoiding the work of personal holiness, hoping that once your candidate is in office, everything will be right again in the world or the nation.
Right.
And so because we think that, then it's like we must do everything that we can to keep and get our candidate back in office. We will cut off the ear of the high priest servant if that's what it takes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And Jesus the whole time would be like, what is you doing, bro? Like, what kingdom are you fighting for? I love America. I love where I live. I have no desire to live in any other country, but I am not fighting for this. I'm not fighting for this country like you, because I believe that in it is the hope of the world.
Right.
Right. I'm fighting for the kingdom of God because the kingdom of God, like Paul says, is eternal. The kingdom of God is the kingdom to which I belong. The kingdom of God encapsulates all those who believe by faith in Jesus Christ, both before me and present and coming.
Yeah.
And I think that the Christian's responsibility is to ensure that we're fighting for the right kingdom.
I think, again, we're not saying you have to be apolitical.
No.
Right? If you feel really called to be invested and involved and active in politics, go do it, please. Please be a spirit-filled, godly Christian who goes and works in politics, advocates, does all of the things. But understand that there is a kingdom that is beyond this kingdom, right? And I think there is a question of idolatry in my mind.
For sure.
When, and this has to come down to people's personal discernment and conviction of the Holy Spirit. But if politics don't go the way you want them to, or if they do, if you're if only, because I'm trying to think, what are the idols behind politics? Well, I think sometimes for people it's money, because they want economic politics to go the way they want them to, because that'll provide maybe the economic benefits they want, or at least the things they think will provide that greater sense of security through economic stability. I think sometimes it's a sense of control.
It's power.
It's power and control.
It's power.
Which the flip side behind the idol of power and control is that you are ultimately controlled by fear. People who really, really want control of things or want power are often some of the most afraid people. And this is not everybody, but there's a subsection of people who are conservative, I think, who very much live in fear of what is coming to get you, whether that is a political party or it's a company or it's the world or it's you name it, whatever thing is that you feel like is threatening you and your family. I think you need to ask yourself seriously if you're living in a state of fear that is in contradiction to like trusting God and living in Him. Mm-hmm. Do you see that? Do you like?
Yeah, I think you're maybe taking a little bit more understanding approach that I would take to it.
I'm being nicer.
Well, I think like you're trying to see what is the underlying like reason that I tend to be a little bit, I don't know, I tend to see it in a little bit more is that like human beings love to have the power.
Yeah.
We love to be in control. Mm-hmm. And even if it's just as relatively benign as my candidate won, my party is in the White House.
Right. Or has the Senate or has the, whatever.
I mean, listen, let's be real honest about the, like, what kind of significant changes actually trickle down from the halls of Congress and the rooms of the White House to me in a 4-year span. Very few. Very few. Not going to say there's a zero.
Right.
Because there are economic policies, there are things like that do trickle down. But so when we celebrate the winning of our guy, we're not, very few of us are celebrating the winning of the policy that's going to be better for everyone.
Yeah.
The winning of the direction for the country that's going to be better for everyone. We're celebrating that we won and someone else lost,
right,
and screw everyone else. And that's kind of the heart that I feel and see behind the obsession with Christians aligning themselves with a system that seeks to gain control and power rather than live subversively in the world that we have as to like defeat the kingdom of darkness and usher in the kingdom of light.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not, okay, hear me when I say, I don't wish for persecution. I don't wish for removal of Christian freedom or religious freedom at all.
Yeah.
Highly, highly blessed. I don't wish for any of that. But let's not pretend that we're, like, it is just a flat out fact that we see a revival of Christian faith in nations where political persecution for the Christian faith is the strongest and highest.
Yes. Yep.
The largest churches in the world, Christian churches in the world, are not in America.
Right.
They're in places like China,
right,
where the government is,
yeah, is the nicest thing. Yeah.
I mean, like they present a religious freedom.
Well, yeah, as long as your church is underneath government authority, then you can meet. But if you, like the Christians did in Rome, the early church, when they were like, no, like we have another Lord that is not Caesar.
Yep.
Right? If you're going to stand that ground, you end up in the underground church in China, which China does not treat very nicely.
No. So, the places in the world where Christianity is governmentally opposed the most has the most vibrant Christian community. That community is largely underground, but we see an extraordinarily explosion of personal revival and personal transformation and personal salvation that comes to places like that. Why is that? I wonder. Maybe because the Christians in those places are not concerned at all about playing a game where they leverage their governmental political candidate for their own spiritual personal reasons, and they are solely focused on the building of the kingdom that moth and rust will not destroy and that thieves will not break in and steal.
Yeah.
And what do you know, when the church organizes itself around that kingdom, it grows with extraordinary measure.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting because I'm going to take a little bit of liberty here. But in some sense, like churches like in China, where it's not, the underground church is fighting for the freedom to not have to put that nation's flag on the stage. Mm-hmm. Whereas then here, what is often happening is where we do have the freedom to not have to fly a nation's flag, we, for some reason, then choose to put that flag on our stage. In some places. Yeah. Or there was a church I attended a church once and never really had been there before. Came in, it was Memorial Day, and there was up front what many churches have is like the table for communion.
Don't say it. Please don't say it.
It says, "Do this in remembrance of me" on the front. And they had every single military seal and flag and thing displayed on that table. And then the worship leader got up there and said something about something equating Christ's sacrifice to military sacrifice, making that kind of analysis. And I was like, this...
Forgive us, Lord.
Yeah.
Forgive us, Lord.
and I don't say that, again, I'm not saying that to kind of lessen the service of veterans or the importance of that. No. But none of them are Jesus. That table and what's supposed to go on there, what we're supposed to be doing in remembrance is in remembrance of one death. Mm-hmm. And that I was just and I'm sure that they maybe weren't thinking in the terms, I don't think the intentionality was there.
They probably weren't thinking theologically. They're probably just trying to honor those who had given themselves in service of their country.
And they were just the table's up there. We'll just use the table.
Extraordinarily admirable.
Right.
And honoring, and I want to honor those things as well. But Jesus would have flipped that table over.
Yeah.
Or I say he would have flipped the table over. But I think you would have. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But
maybe Cameron would have.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say that you walked in and then over the communion elements they had the American flag, or over the altar it was the American flag.
No. No, but I feel like that is still
it's in the same vein.
It is in the same vein, and it is and I do feel like that to me that's how it feels when you have an American flag up on the corner of your stage. There's one kingdom.
Yep.
And it's invisible. And so don't even get me started on the Christian flag. Yeah. Because it's invisible. Yeah. So, but.
Right. Yeah. Christian flag. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It can be frustrating.
It can. And it's and it's really interesting. I feel like Trump's first election, 2016, is at least the beginning point for a lot of people who are around my age or a little bit younger of when they started to kind of deconstruct Christianity.
Yep.
It was a bit of a watershed point for people. And it was even for me, because I was very confused, because I saw a lot of people, some religious some religious leaders who I knew personally, who had an impact on my early faith development, were hitching themselves so strongly to a political candidate, to political ideals and rhetoric. And I was very confused because some of the things I was seeing were not demonstrating like the fruits of the Spirit, were just like being kind of profane or being, and at least from my vantage point, like you could disagree with me and like maybe we could have a conversation about it, but my uncut, honest opinion is that Trump was mostly pandering towards Christians. I don't think, like, again, like, I don't know, is Trump Christian? Not really my decision to decide. No. But like, if you were to ask me,
it's hard to examine fruit from 50,000 feet away, right?
But from my vantage point, it very much looked like it was like he is pandering towards the demographic that is going to get him elected, which are like very conservative and religious individuals. Mm-hmm. And it felt very much like just a constant facade. Mm-hmm. And so from my vantage point, I was seeing all these religious leaders who I looked up to following someone that seemed to me not to be the most genuine or even to have like the character qualifications I felt had been held up to me my entire life and childhood of saying a Christian leader looks like this. And when I looked at him, I was like, I see some significant gaps here. Mm-hmm. And now I'm left here wondering, well, what does that mean about my faith if some of the religious leaders and faith leaders I looked to are now like hitching themselves so strongly in this direction? What does it say about the foundation of my faith and the decisions? And that was the same thing I think a lot of people experienced, and a lot of people deconstructed to either a degree or entirely their faith. And some of the watershed of that was some of what was happening in and around there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would agree. Yeah. Well, I don't know that I have much else to say on the matter at this point. I think most of what I said last week encapsulated my general thoughts and feelings, and this was kind of like just an extended commentary on this particular branch of like Christian practice, which just assumes that, that our citizenship in America is primary to our citizenship in heaven, but it still informs it. So we should pick the candidate that we feel most accurately like understands us. But like if the message is like an anti-establishment, we're angry, let's all be angry together and just say what we feel all the time without even really thinking about the consequences of how it represents the name and character of Christ.
Right.
Then I think we have a lot of examination to do about our relationship with Jesus. So.
Yeah. I think, like, to summarize my point, because maybe I made a bunch of people mad who've listened, and maybe they've stopped listening. But, like, I don't think we get to be the deciders of who has God's endorsement. Mm-mm. If you, like I said, you should vote your conscience. You should vote who you think is going to be the best candidate. Yeah. Like, you should do all of those things, and you should do so well. But I'm so hesitant to turn to anybody, even if like my ideal candidate, like the candidate who like I think would be the best candidate in the entire world. They've they were a pastor before they went into politics, and they have daily devos and all that. Like, they're just the absolute perfect person, I think, right? I would not put my stamp and say, this is God's candidate.
Right.
Because I don't think I have the authority to do that. No. And so when I'm like, all the all the things I've been saying, I think on this episode has been trying to say that. Like, can we stop tying Christ? Can we stop trying to tie Christ to people that are not him and assume that we know God's will?
Right. Agreed.
So,
thanks for listening to part 2.
Yeah.
Feel free to send in questions, comments to our text line, 716-201-0507. And we'd love it if you would like and subscribe, share it, comment on it, wherever you listen. And we will catch you on the next episode.
Yep. We'll see y'all then.